Hey, this is U.S. Olympic gold medalist Tara Davis Woodhull.
And I'm U.S. Paralympic gold medalist Hunter Woodhull.
As athletes, our lives are about having a clear path.
And a team that you can absolutely trust.
So when it came to getting the best mortgage,
we chose PennyMac.
PennyMac is proud to be the official mortgage provider of Team USA and you.
Learn more at pennymac.com. PennyMac Loan Services, LLC, Equal Housing Lender, NMLS ID 35953. Licensed by the Department of Financial Protection and Innovation under the California Residential Mortgage Lending Act. Conditions and restrictions may apply.
Hey, Typology friends, welcome back to the podcast on which we explore the mystery of the human personality and the human adventure through the lens of the Enneagram, joined by my dear friend of many years, Anthony Skinner. Anthony, nice to see you.
Woo-woo, good to be with you today, Ian. As always.
Oh, as always.
I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Oh, man, so am I. We have a lot of 8 energy in the house, new 8 energy in the house. Dan Simons, co-owner of the farmer-owned restaurant group, founding farmers, among many other things. Welcome to Typology.
Thank you for having me here. I am looking forward to diving in.
All right. Well, you just discovered you were an 8. Now, you've actually got a report of my assessment right there with you. Curious to know, I mean, this is such new material for you, though I guess people on your team are familiar with the Enneagram. What do you think? Does it sound like you? How's it landing with you that you're an 8 with a 9 wing?
Fascinating, and thank you. You know, I love the learning journey. I'm 55 years old, so I've had plenty of time so far for the learning journey, and hopefully more time. I was really intrigued with the results. You know, knowing myself, I have to be in the right frame of mind to take critical feedback and then determine, is the critical feedback valuable or not valuable, as opposed to making sure I don't decide that prior, right? And then, hear or listen through that framework. So I dove in and I made a lot of notes. And I would say that by the end of the report, and again, talk about detailed, insightful information, lots to learn. But by the end of the report, I thought, this thing gets me. And I would add to that I'm not the typical 8. So then when I went back and read it again, once I understood, what is a 9 wing and what are these different, centers of how we might react and what are the stressors or derailers, and I started to understand the tool, I think it really got me.
Great. Cool. I'm really pumped for this conversation because we know that, your mission is all about leading companies with empathy and humanity and putting people's emotional well-being on equal footing with profit, which I really want to talk about because I'm impressed with that. As a therapist and as a consultant who goes into companies every month to talk about the Enneagram and mental health and how understanding ourselves and other people create a culture of care, and that the research shows that when you have that there is an actual increase in productivity, effectiveness, retention, all the things that we want in a culture. And I just love how the Enneagram speaks to that in ways that are very actionable, very accessible, lots of aha moments like the ones you just described for yourself.
For some reason, it's always been clear to me. I think, I was fortunate with the family that I was raised in and the relationships. And then I'd always wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I worked for other people for a lot of years. I didn't start my own business until I was in my 30s. But it was always obvious to me that if you wanted to win at work, you needed to win as a team. And, as an athlete growing up, I just understood that it was never about the individual talent. And the minute it was about individual talent, that team couldn't go all the way, whatever the sport was. And so I just applied those same things to work. And I thought, how do you lift up your teammates? How do you get your teammates to lift you up? And so that just, has sent me on this journey from the earliest time in business for me of looking to lift up others and looking to have others, allow others to lift me up too, because we all need that help to bloom and figure out what the best and evolving version of ourselves are.
I love that and wish I was working for you. But actually, I work for me, so that's okay too.
That's pretty good.
So, hey, when people first learn their type, they usually have questions, and so I realize that you're probably kind of fertile territory for interesting questions. Do you have any questions about eights before I maybe start to poke around with you a little bit?
My first question, I have lots of questions, so it's fun when you get experts and they're like, great, like teach me stuff. One of the things that the report specifically said is that my combination is rare or less common. I'm curious. I mean, I don't want to question the report, but in other words, when you looked at my report, did you also does that stand out to you? Like the way putting 8 and 9 together, the main type with the wing. And then also, and it was interesting, I loved the way you broke down sort of the cut scores of, for me, what I looked at was how just with probably 1 or 2 different answers, I might have, because I think my top 2 or 3 were almost tied at 18 or 17%, and then my next 2 were close. So I was curious what your reaction was to seeing that.
Yeah, so the actual percentages are a little bit not misleading, but our assessment, we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars with a research psychologist and his team putting together what we felt was a very reliable, valid psychometric, not some stupid online quiz that, people take and, I'm a golden retriever. It's just like, oh my gosh. And whenever you see most Enneagram tests are people trying to grab for your email. That's what they're doing. Take my test for free, right? No, they want your email. So it's predatory, and it drives me crazy because as a trained therapist, right, I have experience in psychometrics, right? Whether it's, just really in-depth clinical testing, right? So we wanted to put together something robust. The percentages are actually, even though you may be very close, it's a little bit like earthquakes, right? You have a 5.3 versus a 5.7. It's a big difference.
I see.
Right? And also you're not seeing the whole number. When you see, because I took them apart, I took off the back end of the numbers because they were just too confusing to people.
Sure.
It'd be like 18.996621. Literally, it was like a 15-digit number, right? What's more important to do is maybe just look at the order versus the percentages of which types come where for you. Well, I'm pulling up your report, but I got 17 pages here.
Yeah, part
here
of it too is type A is 18% and type 2 is 17%.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, your 8 is connected to your 2, and Ian can talk about that, but that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
I really liked and it felt accurate to me. This 8 with a 9 wing. Because as I read through some of the typical 8s, I didn't feel like it represented me. Anger isn't part of my life. There are several things that aren't there. And then I was reading through, I'm like, well, that doesn't mean, the 9 wings sort of put together a lot. And I do think that I may represent those contrasting, in a sense, styles of the intensity with the heart. I mean, I used the phrase balance of head and heart. That's sort of how I try to teach the decision making. It's why I'm a conscious capitalist. Yes, I want capitalism, ROI. I believe capitalism is the most powerful force on the planet to lift up community and people. And I believe if you don't do capitalism consciously and mindfully, it is destructive and it can be terrible. So I thought about that 8 with a 9 wing in what I don't take capitalism. I take capitalism with a conscious wing. And that was my parallel.
Yeah. So let's circle back on that and I'll put it on the back end of this. Let me just talk to you a little bit about what 8s are like. There's a lot of misunderstandings about every type, and there are some stereotypes, and that's not type, right? That's more like a cartoon version of somebody, right? So 8s are called the challengers, mostly because they can be, when they're not very self-aware, pretty challenging to other people, right? Their intensity, their larger than life personality, their energy, right? I run on 120 volts. Anthony runs on 120 volts. You run on 240 volts. there's a kind of lust for life, this kind of, I always say Zorba the Greek, but people haven't read that book forever. But it's this kind of, there's a kind of chutzpah. There's a kind of go for it. There's this drive. It's like, and the challenger can come because there's also some oppositional energy. So it's energy that moves and goes against. So oftentimes, maybe when you were younger, think back to 25, testing authority, testing the limits, testing boundaries, not liking others to place limitations on you, right? Like anytime someone's like, don't do that, you're like, what? Like, that kind of go against energy, right? Some people have moved toward energy. So people who move toward others. Some people have energy that comes alongside, moves with people. Others have more, just by nature, a more assertive kind of energy, which makes sense for given what you've done with your life, right? And especially in the hospitality space, I mean, my gosh, if you don't have assertive energy, if you're passive and not moving, you're probably not going to be in business very long.
True. That is very true.
Yeah. So we say that the passion of the 8 is lust, which is not meaning in the sexual sense of the word. It means it in the sense that it's like this need for immediate engagement with others in the environment. It's like, I want to engage. I want to affect this environment. I want to affect these people. I want to engage with it. And so it's this beautiful, like I tell people all the time, right? Like you actually contain all 9 types. It's just that one is more dominant in you than the others, right? And so I long for 8 energy in my own life. And sometimes I tap into 8 energy, but I have to burn more calories to do it than you would, right? For you, it would just be flow, right? For me, it's like almost a conscious thing. Like I've got to power up here and, move in with some 8 energy. So, I mean, I think that the upside of being an 8 is this ability to drive to this forward momentum energy, this very future-oriented mind. Oh, you're laughing and smiling.
Yeah,
what am I?
That resonates with me. I'll just give you a quick comment here. So I've been married for 25 years. At my wedding, I said, my wife's name's Susie, and I said, I know this relationship will be great for me forever because she is teaching me how to stop and smell the roses. And there are times in my life when I didn't even see the roses.
Yes.
So I do have an innate drive. What's the plan? Where are we going? And the focus can be about the destination. And so, Susie, I'm not sure which type she would be. She's an artist. She is super chill. And so as I'm just hearing you talk about that, you're right. That this is a true aspect of myself, this drive towards, awesome, what's the plan?
Yeah. And it's beautiful, right? When it's properly harnessed, right? Now, let's talk about anger for 1 second, because you said you don't experience that in yourself. And a lot of times 8s, 9s, and 1s, they're in this, what's called the anger triad, right? They have issues around anger. And at one level, anger, the word anger here is about life force. Remember I said 240 volts, right? Now, so it's really about instinctual life energy, right? The kind of energy that says, this is who I am. This is what I stand for. This is what I'm doing. This is me individuating and actualizing as a human being. Here's me affecting the environment, right? So it's that kind of energy, right? I bet you your wife has less of that than you do by a large amount, right? It's this kind of, sometimes you could feel like you're out over your skis. You know what I mean? Like going downhill at 1,000,000 miles an hour and maybe risking a wheel coming off, as you're going.
So I would say I never feel like that, but listening to you, really like absorbing what you're saying, I realized as I was reading through it, I feel like I never have reactive, uncontrolled, or unintentional anger. Anger is not a problem for me. Reactivity is not a problem for me. And when I need to channel that inner beast, like I trained in martial arts for years, there are times when there is something that you need to draw on. I definitely have that.
Have you been in a lot of therapy before?
I've done a fair amount, mostly around my eating disorder, but and then like first time a little bit like some anxiety therapy. So not a lot of therapy, but enough good exposure to it that it's been super helpful for me.
Right. So it's so interesting about the eating thing. So in that anger triad, there is a relationship I do see, and it's all anecdotal, right? But it's more like there's a lot of issues around control for 8s, 9s, and 1s, right? 8s, here's the driving motivation of the 8. It's a need to assert strength and power over others in the environment in order to mask vulnerability and weakness. Okay? That's a fairly common sort of descriptor of some of what's motivating the personality pattern of the 8. When it comes to food, oftentimes I see people in this triad, now any type could have an unhealthy, unskillful relationship with food. However, 1s, I see a disproportionate number of people who are anorexic and bulimic who are 1s. And it's more about self-control. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. It's all about control, like on overdrive, like much to their lack of health, right? Now, for the 8, there's that lust again. It's this consuming of life. It's this kind of, and also there is a kind of control thing there. But sometimes with 8s, it's an out of control kind of thing. It's eating out of control, and I don't know if that's the variant of eating disorder that you had, but and 9s sometimes use food for narcotizing, numbing, right? So it's interesting that you brought that up.
It's been I've struggled with it. I've struggled with it really since my mid-20s. Probably came out of high school wrestling and that phase of my life, as opposed to maybe being associated with the trauma. But for me, it's really just been it's body dysmorphia combined with just obsessive negative thoughts around food. I'm always able to manage my weight in a healthy way, but I waste a tremendous amount of time thinking negative thoughts. The therapy is wildly helpful, and actually GLP-1s look like they are the miracle for this food noise problem. So it certainly affects, I think anything like this, any dysfunction disorder that anyone struggles with, it both affects your personality, and in many respects, it's just simply part of one's personality.
Yes.
So, and I think that's been my journey to sort of accept that part of me. And it's like, I work on it, I learn about it. But I can see how this is where the Enneagram is so valuable. It's just about creating understanding, and giving you a different view into these aspects of yourself.
Yeah. So again, you talk about wrestling, and, wrestling is a good channeling of that anger. That's a positive, right? And it's a tapping into this. And it's also has the exhaustion of energy, of anger. You know what I mean? Like, but properly channeled. Does that make sense for you?
Yes, absolutely. And that's where I think when I think about anger, I think, well, for me, it's a choice as opposed to when anger isn't a choice. So, in wrestling, it would have done me no good to be angry before I walked on the mat. And it would have done me no good, just me personally, to be angry when I walked off the mat. But while you're on the mat, you damn well better be angry. But you can't be overwhelmed by it so that you get that micro tunnel and you can't sort of think clearly. So I think I do like anger as a tool used intentionally, with that space between stimulus and response. And in that moment, in that right place, anger is a choice. When anger happens, but it isn't the choice, I think that's problematic.
Is that something you were aware of like early on, like in high school? Like, did you connect those dots?
I could see that the range of my teammates and our opponents who had sort of anger management problems, and they didn't harness it. It caused more trouble, and it didn't help them in the sport because it overwhelmed the technical thinking or the strategic decision that you need to do sort of simultaneously. So I didn't have this vocabulary, but I did have some awareness as to seeing how it affected people.
So personality is partly temperament, right? And some people, some therapeutic schools would say genetic, others would talk more in terms of temperament. Personality, we also think, arises in response to childhood wounds, trauma that you didn't know how to process when they were inflicted at the time, right? Like you didn't have the intellectual capacity to process what was happening. And so part of what happens is we develop our personality patterns as a way to cope, manage relationships, to protect ourselves. When you look back on your life, was there a trauma or a wound, and we all have those, that may have influenced the formation of this 8 pattern in your life?
I can't see that as I reflect. I will acknowledge I'm a bit of a unicorn with the good luck that I was raised with, like loving family. I'm the youngest of 4, like no drama, no trauma. The memory that sticks with me that was the most traumatic and difficult was there was about 3 months when I was in 6th grade where I went through a phase of some really pretty hardcore bullying. And, I went from being, a popular kid with friends to sort of really just falling out, and just like the whole tide just like turned against me. And I was like public enemy number 1 for 3 months. It was super mean and hurtful and scary, physically scary, emotionally scary. And my parents, who are immigrants to America, they didn't know. I'm not sure any parent would have known what to do, but they didn't know what to do. But they were super loving and super helpful, in ways that they could just be there for me. And eventually that phase ended. But when I think about aspects that I read through in the Enneagram, that experience for me is my deepest driver of why I will fight to the death to protect the underdog.
All right, now we're talking.
There you go.
That's 8. That is out of the literature. You just quoted the literature
right,
about 8s.
Yeah.
But the 8, in some ways, I take exception with the term challenger. And every teacher has different signifiers describing types, right? In some ways, I think a better word, particularly for what's called social 8s, you're a self-preservation 8, according to the test. And I won't get you into all that. But I would call them defenders. And it's a very different feel to it, right? When you think of it, like 8s, some 8s deny their own vulnerability. So when they see vulnerability in somebody else, they want to protect it as a projection. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, by protecting the other, it's a way of protecting the self. Like it's a strange thing, but I've heard 8s talk to me about that on any number of occasions,
And, my business and certainly my industry, being a restaurateur, gives me the opportunity to, help people, support people. We literally, when there are people who can't afford food or can't have access to food, we can always help with that. Our employees by nature are often first generation or immigrants to America. Some are transient through our industry, but we've got people who've been working with us for 18 years since we opened our first restaurant. And it's an industry where anyone can climb the ladder. The ladder goes down to the lowest levels and it goes to the highest levels, and you can help anyone. You can give anyone a hand up. And so I love the platform that it gives me, and it's let me go outside the 4 walls to help. I feel pretty comfortable with my own vulnerabilities. I don't love the word. I have tried to just sort of preach that we should replace the word in business. We should replace the word vulnerability with the word honesty, because vulnerability has all this, like, as if it's hard to be vulnerable. There's a stigma, people are like, oh, I have to get vulnerable, but I can't. Say, well, why don't you just be honest? If you got an eating disorder, you got an eating disorder. If you feel like an imposter, you feel like an imposter. If you don't know the answer, you don't know the answer. Like, I think honesty is maybe an easier place to go to, but that has not, because of my parents and my siblings, this has never been hard for me to be honest about the stuff that I'm scared of or struggle with or worry with. And so I've just brought that into my leadership style.
Therapists, let me say this out loud. The work you do is sacred, but the admin that surrounds it, not so much. Scheduling, notes, billing, insurance follow-ups, all the necessary but exhausting tasks that live on either side of the session. That's why I want to introduce you to Simple Practice. Simple Practice is an all-in-one EHR that's HIPAA compliant, high-trust certified, and built specifically with therapists in mind. It puts everything, scheduling, billing, insurance, and client communication into one place, so your systems are finally working for you instead of against you. Automated appointment reminders help reduce no-shows. Note templates make documentation faster, and the business side of your practice starts to feel more manageable. They even offer credentialing services if you're just getting started or actively growing, which can save you a lot of time and energy. So if you're ready to simplify the business side of your practice, now is a great time to try Simple Practice. Start with a 7-day free trial, then get 50% off your first 3 months. Just go to simplepractice.com to claim the offer. Again, that's simplepractice.com.
This is Chelsea Handler from Dear Chelsea. I have some very exciting news about an ethical phone carrier I just switched to. Forget about all these other phone companies. Forget about Verizon. Forget about AT&T. Forget about T-Mobile. There's this new carrier called Noble Mobile, and they actually pay you to stay off your phone. You can earn real money, up to $20 back every month, just for putting your phone away. If you're like me and you're tired of feeling controlled by your phone, social media, or just disgusted by those screen time alerts, this is the answer. Go to noblemobile.com/Chelsea and try it for $10. That's noblemobile.com/Chelsea.
Well, you are very, very fortunate in that regard. And it does sound to me like you have a very strong 9-wing. Mm-hmm. And so that strong 9-wing, so all right, an 8 with a 7-wing, you would be more of a black and white thinker. And you seem to be able to deal in grays. And that's not, there's a lot of 8s that's hard for, right? There are certain types where there's just natural black and white dualistic thinking. And some types that are better at non-dualistic thinking, right? It can be both and, not either or, right? And it sounds like you are comfortable with both and thinking.
That's true. I love the gray. I live in the gray. I think most things are gray. And when I feel crystal clear that something's black and white, then it's fucking black and white.
Okay, so this explains why. All right, so there are certain types that when you put them together, right, with their wing, it explains the inner dissonance that somehow or another, or there are paradoxes or dissonances that happen inside of us where there are contrary forces in play at the same time all the time. So I'm a 4. 4s are very concerned with authenticity, being original, being unique, being special. He's got his, I got my little thing on today because I'm special and unique. I look like a cook now that I think about it.
I love it. That's
like a chef.
It's very nice wrapped around.
And then, but the 3, my 3-wing is all about ambition and appearances and more about surfaces, looking good, being admired, being successful, wanting people to know I'm successful, right? So I have that flavor a little bit in my 4. It's helped me build a business. It's helped me do a lot of things, right? but they fight with each other. Like my 4 desire for authenticity sometimes fights with my 3 wings need for my ambitious side, right? Now, with an 8, with a 9 wing, that 8, I'm crystal clear. It's black and white. Get out of my way. Is kind of wrestling a little bit, and maybe not wrestling, but living alongside that ability to also be a broader, more nuanced thinker about life. So it's a both and it seems like a paradox at times, but it's actually quite lovely and actually means that I would call that bilingual, right? Like you are able to speak in both domains, if you will. When I have moral clarity about X, it can be black and white. When I think about many other things, it's both and I'm comfortable with either domain.
And probably when I struggle with some aspect of leadership, it's when I fail to have it be both and. And this is where, I'm not everyone's cup of tea. And that's because I delivered my view of clarity or a decision before I was really seeking to understand.
Yes.
To understand who was listening, to understand what their perspective is, to make sure that someone's educating me on sort of seeing things on all sides. And this is what I love about the leadership journey. Like I'm still growing, I'm still learning. And these sorts of reflections, almost every problem that I have in our company, and I have a business partner as well, it's a common refrain for us to say, because of us. It's just because of us. And so it's like, hey, what did I do to cause this? Or what did I do to not solve this effectively? Or what did I do to not understand this properly? Mm-hmm. And then it usually just means I haven't listened enough. There's more information out there. So I like, anytime I think I'm confident, and this is why it's like just a reflection of how definitively I stated my opinion about once I'm sure it's black and white. And I think it's fine at some point. There's nothing wrong with certainty. And it's valuable to have a listening and absorbing journey on your path to certainty. And if I miss that, then I don't perform well.
That's your 9 wing. And it's also healthy 8 energy, right? Mm-hmm. Like sometimes you'll run into 8s that are young or not very evolved or self-aware, and they're overconfident in their perception of reality, right? It's like, they're just like, the story they tell themselves about something they're observing is a fact versus an incomplete narrative that they've just come up with in their brain to explain someone else's behavior, right? And I was trained as a therapist in part this school called cognitive behavioral therapy, which I'm sure you know about, right? And the idea is that we observe something and then we have a feeling about it and then we act on that feeling. But actually, there's a 4th thing, which is I observe my employee doing something stupid. I then tell myself a story about that employee and what they're doing. That story is actually what drives the feeling I have, which then determines the way I'm going to act next, right? So that has taught me over the years, like always stop and ask myself, before you feel much or act on this, what is the story you're telling yourself about this person and this situation? And are you ready to accept that at best it's incomplete? Mm-hmm. The story is incomplete, if not actually entirely inaccurate in many situations, right? And I think that's just good leadership.
Because isn't it probably, I'll say probably and always, isn't it always true that our stories are incomplete? That the information that we have is incomplete? Isn't that actually the natural state of it?
Mm. I think so. And that's why when I work with CEOs and like leadership teams, I'm always like, 3 most important words you got are tell me more. Just tell me more. And say it until people are tired of you. Because you need to know, you have to increase the pool of meaning make the pool bigger. You know, and now at a certain point, you can't fill the pool to the point that you never make decisions, right? You have to, at a certain point, you go, I got enough in the pool to make a decision. But at the same time, you know, I want to make sure that I have, but most leaders are moving too fast to do that. They would rather just go on the story they got and because they're moving on to other decisions, other things they got to do. And I'm like, that's actually an inefficiency in your process. You don't think it is, but it actually is an inefficiency when you do that.
Yeah, I like this, you know, slow is fast and fast is smooth. These sorts of thoughts of, you know, you do get more accomplished and better and deeper, slower and with more, tell me more. And I see why that's hard to do sometimes. You know, sometimes it feels like a firefight. Sometimes it really is a firefight. I want to tell you something that I think really makes the point about this Enneagram for me. So when I was 23 years old, I had a great boss. He's now my business partner, but he was my boss for years. I was 23 years old. I was a young manager. And I'd said to him, we were sitting down having a career chat. I said, look, I should be promoted because let's just be objective. I am better than the guy above me and the guy above him. And you know it, and I know it. That's just
so eight.
Yeah.
Just true. And why don't I get promoted? And he just looked at me and he said, you're probably right. And what you should do is you should just shut up and do the work. Trust the process, because when you say things like that out loud, it actually just makes you look and sound stupid.
Did you appreciate his energy, like the way he's addressed you? And
I did. It was perfect. And he was a wonderful mentor for me. I could absorb it. He delivered it in the right way for me, which I think the Enneagram also teaches, like, who are you talking to? Understand your audience and deliver them a message or a meal that fits their appetite. And that coaching. So I was more of like the classic early immature 8 right then.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just, as you're teaching me this and explaining it to me, I'm realizing, yes, that was there. And I've been fortunate to have good teaching and then learn this technique of self-assessment and self-correction, et cetera, which, you know, continues to lead me. So I bet if I look back 20 years from now and I look at where I was today, I will think like, oh, wow. And so I'm glad I'm listening to people like you who are able to, like, not only teach this, but provide a tool. It's powerful.
Yeah, well, it's so much fun, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm getting ready to go do this, going to this place called the Modern Elder Academy. Do you know Chip Conley, the Modern Elder Academy? It's kind of an very interesting place. He used to own Joie de Vivre hotels and then was at the very front end of Airbnb, like one of the first 5 or 10 people there. And Chip is a really interesting, thoughtful guy and in the hospitality space for many, many years, which is why Airbnb was attracted to him when they were still like in somebody's living room. And he is a big fan of the Enneagram, big time fan of the Enneagram. And, you know, Chip is aware that in the hospitality space, you know, when you're young, I guess there's a tendency to be more asleep in the patterns of your personality because you haven't lived long enough to see the wreckage of them. You know what I mean? Like you're just saying dumb shit all the time. When you're 23, you're just saying dumb shit all the time, right?
And it's hard to find the mirror, you know, and look in it and see what at least it was hard for me when I was young to find that mirror. And I see it with my kids now who are sort of around the 20s age. And it's why we need good mentors and parents, because holding up a mirror in a safe way, I think it's the most powerful and effective thing that someone can do for someone else.
And what led me to talk about Chip was because he's in the hospitality space. I'm going to see him this weekend. Also, because, you know, he's aware, as you are, right? You got to deliver the message to different people in different ways. So I know based on like when I'm leading workshops, I teach people, listen, when you're talking to an 8, this is the preferred method they like to use, right? Or when you're talking to a 3, like I'm a 4. If you had said that to me at 23, I'd have gone to bed with a bottle of scotch for 3 days. Like if someone had said to me, just shut up and do the work, I'd have been like, and I'd have been like, hiding. You were like, great, got it, moving on, right? Like just gonna go follow your advice. So every type, when you really understand all 9 of them, you're like, oh, I know how to move through the world as a more effective, sensitive, attuned, and frankly, loving presence with other people, because I know how they are processing life as it's coming at them, and it therefore is so helpful in marriages or with friendships or like in every area of life. So I want to focus in on your work just for a second. So again, I want to just say this mission you have, which is to lead companies with empathy and humanity by putting emotional well-being on equal footing with profit. As I mentioned, I do a lot of work in this space. You are the first person I have ever, a first leader of a place that I have ever. I'm trying to persuade CEOs and senior management teams every month to do precisely what you're saying, but there is incredible resistance to it.
I'm fortunate at this point to have a platform and a case study, because I'm not a clinician, I'm not a practitioner, I'm not an advocate, I'm not working for an NGO, I'm just a business guy. So I can present the evidence internally to my team and externally of the value creation with this approach. And then I can highlight for people the value destruction without this approach. And so, I'm cautious. I try not to be preachy about it. I understand why people were raised in the business world in a capitalist society to believe that profit is your, maximizing profit is your fiduciary duty. And it's just a false narrative. Unless your goal is to make the most amount of money in the shortest amount of time, to hell with the ripple effect and the outcomes. But I find that that's actually not most people's goals. Even if they think it's their goal, I'm sure we all know people that have made tons of money, reached the top of the financial mountain, kind of hate themselves and hate the life. And are just miserable under it. So I know why business leaders are resistant, because they just haven't seen that it's possible, or they've tried a little bit and they're like, well, there's no ROI. Well, there is. And so for me, it's about retention and it's about productivity, and I can do the equation and I can talk about it. So that's why we have mental health benefits and parental paid leave, and why we create a culture that makes it okay to actually just be honest. You don't have to do any more than be honest. So I love that you're out there talking about it, and that you have clients, and that you're able to be part of this push towards doing it mindfully. There is no sacrifice of long-term profit, and there is absolutely no sacrifice in enterprise value, just the opposite. You will create the most valuable enterprise if you do it this way. And sure, there are exceptions. Yes, of course. Do we see, people who are jerks on the front page of the paper that might be super wealthy and whatever? Yeah, sure. But I would say dig a little deeper. Notice their drug addiction. Notice all their shattered relationships. Notice that they kind of must hate themselves. Like you don't have to be a genius to look at some of the people we see on the front page of the newspaper who have had, financial success to realize that there's a lot that is a disaster.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, compensation cannot only be measured financially. Compensation is about the experience of my work too. Like that is a part of my compensation. If I'm in a place, to use a term you would use, right? If I'm in a true culture of care, the experience of that culture of care is itself, though it doesn't pay the bills literally, is part of my compensation of life.
Yes, exactly. I love how you just said that.
Yeah. So talk to me about, how do you create a culture of care?
I generally look at it in 2 ways. There's the cultural, which I think of as the strategic, the normalization and the destigmatization of any aspect of the human condition. And then there's the tactical, which is really programmatic. What are the structures that we build into the day-to-day systems? And I don't rely on a list of benefits. I have a list of benefits, and I can tell you all about free massage and mental health therapy and all of that. But that's just a result of listening to our people. Hey, what do you need? What's helpful? And maybe the company offering, crisis loans during difficult times is better than some broad brush, therapy benefit. So the culture. So that's really how we approach it, culturally and then tactically with the different programs and approaches. And I try to weave it into the day to day. And it starts with us with shift meetings. It's a restaurant, right? So there's the AM shift meeting, there's the PM shift meeting, there's let's talk about service, what's to come. And we spend a lot of time training how to start meetings one-on-one and group with the question, how are you? And the pause to actually listen for an answer. And then to be prepared for the range of answers that one might receive when one actually, in a caring way, makes someone feel that you really want them to answer, how are you? So that's both cultural and tactical. We teach that question, we teach those responses, and we weave that into, this is how you start a shift meeting.
Yeah, this is so wild because I just trained a management team and I do this quite a lot. And Anthony and I do it in a group that we lead. The question we always start with, what are you bringing in today? And so people might say anxiety or I'm exhausted. And they may say why or not, but they can say one word if they don't want to say any more, or they can actually give us a 2 or 3 sentence explanation for why that's what they're. So it's like, what are you bringing in today? And it's just, one team I did it with, and I mean, high intensity, sales oriented, very intense. I often say about this particular company, I said, you guys have a high resting heart rate. It's really, really high. It's like, ugh! And I'm like, but they instituted that and it made an enormous difference on that team. Or so they tell me.
And this is my capitalist approach. I'm certain you're right. I'm sure it did. And you want to buy the stock of that company just before they implement your suggestions, because they will create more value. You can be the most hard-charging salesperson on the planet with this intensity, suffer no fools, hard-charging, whatever. You'll perform better if when you hit one of life's struggles, you're allowed to say it out loud, have your colleagues acknowledge it, and you'll get through it. And business is a little late to this party. Pro sports gets it now, which is such a great business. The business of sports, you look at what do they invest in for their athletes because they can afford anything and they need their people to perform at the most elite level. And you don't get elite performance by putting your hand around someone's throat and choking the air out of them or making them scared. You just, you don't get that.
Yeah. In fact, the research, and this is, widely known, I think, the research is this. If you get a borderline sociopathic CEO that's all about the hand around the neck, get it done, right? That vibe. Wall Street, 1980s, right? Probably still, but think 1980s, 1990s in investment banks. You will have fast short-term gains. If you bring that guy or woman in, you will have short-term gains that are impressive, but long-term loss. If you bring in somebody who is more like you, who is concerned about the whole person, is wanting the whole person to come to work, right? To use a big trope now in business world. If you do that, you will not have the fast short-term gains of bringing in some kind of, high driver, but you'll have much better long-term gain.
Agreed. And it takes some courage, especially when leaders step in and you step into a new leadership role. And if you're going to be judged on your first 100 days, you need to drive results. I get that. I think there's a way to do both. If leaders just explain to the teams, hey, we're going to take a human-centered approach. This is the kind of culture we're going to move to. We're going to build here. And along the way, there's some stuff we got to fix right now. If I walk into a restaurant and there's light bulbs out, That's a serious problem. We're going to change those light bulbs right now. You know, if there's trash on the floor, if the bathrooms aren't clean, if the knives aren't sharp, we're going to fix that today with intensity, but also with a kindness that makes people want to come back to work tomorrow. And somewhere in there is that balance. But isn't what matters long-term value?
Oh, absolutely. The problem is impatience and a lack of trust in that process. And I understand, because in part it is a new paradigm that is counter to the narrative that has run in most businesses for hundreds of years, right? Like it's an entirely different frame through which, or lens through which, to see the people that work alongside of you and about the culture that you want to create. So if I walked into one of your meetings, or I don't know if you have a headquarters, but into your work environment, what would I feel, and what would you want me to feel in the air culturally? You know what I mean? Like what would I pick up, like just in my body? Like I'd go, oh, this is here. This is here.
I would hope that you would feel the same thing you feel when you walk into someone's home and you're greeted by their Labrador. This unconditional welcome that no matter what you brought in with you, you got picked up and sort of surrounded by that Labrador's love and just welcomeness, and just so, even if you didn't want to be arriving there that day, that you step into RHQ or one of the restaurants and that's the first feeling. And then I would like to think, or I would hope that you would build on that with a welcomeness, and that you would feel seen, which would then lead you to believe that, wow, these people must value me. They're glad I'm here. And whatever your mission is, I don't care if you're selling us something or you're there to fix something, like whatever it is, you've just arrived to our place. I'm glad you're here, and let's do whatever the thing is that we're going to do together.
So I love that, because I've been in, I pick up stuff in the environment. Everybody does, but I'm conscious of it. Lots of people do unconsciously. Certain types get it consciously, right? Like I'll walk in. I remember walking one time into an investment bank in New York to do an Enneagram thing. And I was surprised they actually invite me, because usually financial services, they don't invite guys like me, right? So it was sort of a division being led by a guy that was pretty evolved. I remember walking in going, I'm in a Shark Tank. I can feel it. I can feel I'm in a Shark Tank right now. Like the atmosphere was tense. It was cold. It was clinical. It was driven. It was intense. And it felt menacing. And they almost took a kind of pride in that menacing kind of environment, like, yeah, only the tough make it here type of thing, That's why I asked the question, because I think that's a kind of non-quantifiable kind of indices of the health of a culture.
It just strikes me that if people don't feel welcome, truly welcome, when they arrive somewhere, whatever it is they're there to do or accomplish will be done at some less effective rate, percentage, whatever it is, than if you felt welcome. Because otherwise, then you have to navigate it. Okay, it's a Shark Tank, or they don't really care, or they just make me wait, or you're observing that doesn't look like anybody likes working here. I hope people walk into our restaurants and our office, and as they're observing people and they're being engaged with, that they're like, seems like people like it here. And I wish that wasn't rare in the business world. And it shouldn't be rare. And it doesn't have to be rare. We don't have to be a society where the vast majority of people are disenchanted or frustrated with their job. I do think that we can do capitalism in a way that makes people glad that they're coming to work, even if they wish they had a different job. While they have the one they have, there are ways to help people perform their best and still make them want to come back tomorrow.
You're sort of answering this question, I think, but what's like a culture of care move that, a manager or an owner could make like this week that's sort of that doesn't cost so much, but a move they can make right away?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is, for our managers is noticing. And we don't ideally have to always just ask people what they need or ask them how they are. Our managers and chefs are trained to observe and then say to someone, hey, why don't you just step off the floor for a few minutes, step off the line. Let me cover for you right now. It can be a real gift that you give someone at work. And again, we're very operational centric as restaurateurs and caterers. I would imagine that this can exist in any business where it's just, you just realize hey man, you need me to cover you for a little while? I got you. Why don't you just you go focus on yourself? I feel like that's a gift that anyone in management anywhere can do for a team. Anyone who, you do that for a teammate. That's the first thing that comes up for me, Anthony.
Wonderful. Hey, Dan, tell people where they can learn more about Founding Farmers.
So our restaurants, foundingfarmers.com. My social media and website is at Dan Simon Says. My podcast is Founding DC on all the places. And in person, in any of my restaurants, DC, Maryland, Virginia, Pennsylvania. I'm in the restaurants all the time. We also have a full service catering company, so folks can find me in any of those places.
What's your favorite meal to cook?
Ooh.
Oh, my favorite meal to cook is the meal I didn't cook. Because when someone serves you a meal, I just think, I don't care if it was my dad making me a grilled cheese, or one of our really skilled chefs bringing me, I had a piece of fish with this bourbon balsamic onion glaze yesterday that one of our chefs presented to me. And so I'm receiving a meal. For me, that is my favorite thing.
Oh, that's beautiful. Love that.
Love that. Yeah, me too, man. We were just talking, a friend of mine is in Lima, Peru, and he went to one of the top restaurants in the world there. I can't remember the name of it. Top 10 restaurant in the world. And he was describing it. And I mentioned to him that I had gone maybe 2 years ago to Pujol in Mexico City.
Sure, yeah.
Which is and so there's a culture where it's like watching ballet. It's like this, it's not just about the food. It's really about watching this beautifully choreographed team of 6 waiters to a table of, there's must have been 4 or 5 waiters for 6 of us, 8 of us. I can't remember how many there were. It was a family dinner for Christmas one year. And they just, the whole experience, the atmosphere, the vibe, the food, everything was so extraordinary. And I think it's something very spiritual, this experience of eating and the presentation of food and the preparation of it. And it's not just about, we need to put something in our stomach. You know what I mean? It's it's something so much more artful and beautiful. And I'm glad you're doing it, because I think it's amazing.
Thank you. It's, I believe that it takes a really lovely and talented team to create experiences so that when people come in and gather around the table, they can have a lovely experience, whether they're on their own or they've come in with family or friends. And so I start with the team with the goal of creating that feeling. And boy, I do admire folks like those, like Pujols in Mexico City, and these folks that are doing this elite performance art. It is like ballet. My restaurants are not like that. We're upscale, casual, upscale, polished dining, something like that. But that elite global Michelin star I love watching those performances. I'm probably more like a rugby team, if I was to compare, but it still takes strategy and tactics and teamwork to put it all together.
So good. So we never got to talk about the show The Bear, which I guess is maybe a very unhealthy restaurant culture, but certainly exciting to watch.
It's a great show. And a buddy of mine, Will Guidera, has written several episodes with them. I think it's a great show. There's a lot of food shows I won't watch. I feel like I live it each day, but I thought The Bear brought several things to life that those of us in the industry could resonate with. And there's a tremendous amount in our industry that is actually professional and organized and non-dramatic, and, and that side of it. So I do like to point that out when that topic comes up, but it was a very, very well done show.
Well, because what you were getting was the story. It wasn't really the show's not really about the restaurant, right?
It's the soap opera of the people, which resonates with me because there's no such thing as a company. There's just a thing of this like amalgamation of when you put a group of people together, then they have an output. That's what a company is. Yeah. But the input is the humans, and the bear really captured that.
Yeah, I love it. Well, that's for our next conversation. Dan, I hope we have you on again. This was awesome. I love that you're just learning about the Enneagram. Reach out if you want to know more about eights or about how, this stuff is so helpful to teams just understanding each other at a very low level, right? It's like, oh, you're that. And as Ray Dalio discovered at BlackRock, right? Which is not necessarily my culture type, but what you did learn is that it immediately gives people something to talk about and to bond over. Oh, this is what you're like. Oh, this is what I'm like. How interesting, and it's fun to watch when it gets loose inside of a virus inside of a company and or a group and takes over in a lovely way without being, too distracting. So anyway, welcome.
I'm excited I do want to learn more and use this tool with my team and expose it to us. We use some other, different tools. This has given me a lens and a framework and a vocabulary that I haven't had before that I think could really be valuable to me and my team as we look at each other.
Yes, exactly.
And because it is about how we come together. So yes, this is reflective, but it also gives us sort of like powerful X-ray vision to understand more about our teammates so that we can be better for them and help them be better. So I'm excited to learn more and keep connecting with you guys.
Well, listen, man, learn more about 8. And when you're ready, I'd love to have you back on when you've had a chance to do some reading and learning. And there'll be even more to talk about then. Anthony, I love you, man.
Love you, brother.
We got a nice culture in our little company right here.
Yes, we do.
We get on every
For
day,
sure.
20 minutes early, so we can talk about each other's lives. We
That's
give it,
right.
checking in, making sure everybody's all right. And we hope everyone listening is all right. And as always, may you have love, may you have joy, may you have peace, may you have healing, may you have rest. Until next time.